So the first question is, what is the difference between the shamatha practice of awareness and the practice of trekchö?
Very good. I could draw from my own background here, but I'd rather draw from the explicit answer to that question from the great Yangtang Rinpoche, who is one of the great Vidyadharas alive today. He is truly a Dzogchen master. And so this question was posed to him last fall. And his answer, in fact, I think maybe I was one that asked it. I think I might have been. I wanted to get just razor sharp clarity, and I did. And so here's the answer. And that is, anyone can practice awareness of awareness. You can be a materialist, a Christian, an agnostic, Muslim, Buddhist, anything you like. It has no theory, it has no view that goes with it. It's technology. Shamatha is technology, it's contemplative technology. Vipassana is contemplative science. And to become a Vidyadhara, or practice that meditation, is very deep science. And so to practice awareness of awareness is simply resting in the flow, this phenomenological or experiential flow of being aware. That's all there is to it. But now you may use the same method, and that is just be resting in the flow of awareness, perhaps observing that which is aware. But if you cut through the conditioned mind, this mind that is arising from moment to moment, that is conditioned by many, many causes and conditions, that becomes virtuous and non-virtuous, dull and clear, and so forth. If you cut through this fluctuating and conditioned mind, you cut through that. It's trekchö, it means cutting through something rigid and gnarly, and cut through to the ground. And you actually are viewing reality from the perspective of Rigpa. That's your vantage point. The method is the same, but because you're viewing reality from the perspective of Rigpa, the method is now trekchö. So the same method without the view is shamatha, with the view is trekchö.
Thank you.
Thank you for wonderful teachings. So from our ordinary experience, we know that physical brain affects our mind. Let's say when the body is tired, or when we drink tea or coffee, we know it affects the clarity and so on. So we see that cause and effect or correlation. So are you saying that the brain affects, let's say, mind or ordinary thoughts at that level of clarity, but the Rigpa, or the pristine awareness, that is independent of the brain and not affected by it?
There's a very clear demarcation within the Dzogchen tradition, but I've seen it elsewhere as well, of three dimensions of mind. And what psychologists study is what the Buddhists call, and including Freud, well, Freud for sure, and modern cognitive psychology, affective psychology, and cognitive neuroscience. When they refer to mind, it's what Buddhists call coarse mind. Coarse mind. And this is the mind, and not only mental awareness, but also visual perception, auditory, and so forth. So coarse mind includes the five physical senses, and mental, the mind as in this phenomenon, this faculty by which we remember, think, imagine, hope, fear, and so forth. And this arises independent upon the brain, right? And this has been known, but this is not breaking news. This has been known for a very long time. Damage the brain, and a friend of mine had his optic nerve damage. Now he's blind in one eye, okay? Visual cortex is fine, but one little part, the optic nerve is damaged, now he's blind in one eye. And likewise, with Alzheimer's, with Lou Gehrig's disease, with brain trauma, with schizophrenia, with mental imbalances that may have a genetic influence, all of these are influencing the brain, but also through mental training, exercising the mind, so neurogenesis kicks in. We know there's a very strong correlations. And here, neuroscience is providing a very great service in highlighting many of these strong correlations. We also know, as a thought experiment, I'll do it on myself so I won't seem mean to others, if I take a mallet, let's say a hammer, and I just start hitting my head with it very hard, I'll start losing one faculty after another, until I'm dead. And that would look like, well, you damage the mind a little bit, and then more and more, and now you really sledgehammer it, and I'm no longer breathing, and now the brain is now finished. If you're studying the mind only from physical perspective, the very reasonable conclusion would be, look, damage the brain a little bit, and you go blind, or you can't remember as well, Or if you have emotional bipolarity or what have you, damage it more, you're more mentally impaired, and damage it a whole lot, you don't have a mind anymore. This is a very natural and reasonable conclusion if you're looking at the mind from only the outside. But in a way, it's not breaking news. We've known this for a very long time. And so that dimension of the mind, why the Buddha needed to get a good meal and restore his health to achieve enlightenment, this was a message from the very beginnings of Buddhism. But there's something in between this mind, which psychologists have studied indirectly by way of brain behavior and questionnaires, and the Buddhist contemplatives, Hindu, Christian, Sufi, and so forth, have examined very rigorously from a first-person perspective. There's something between this mind, which definitely, my mind, I'm 67, my mind did not exist 68 years ago. Alan Wallace's mind, nowhere in the universe. And 68 years from now, I think it's a very safe bet, Alan's mind will not exist anywhere in the universe. Because this person's mind is arising upon independence upon this person's brain. Damage it, and there are consequences. But is that all there is to it? I call, if one concludes, well, what we studied is all there is, I call that a flat mind perspective, like flat earth. This is a flat mind. Because by and large, academic psychology and neuroscientists are studying only normal people and mentally impaired and brain damaged people. And when they do study meditators, they study their brains and behavior. You know, this is like trying to understand meditation by understanding mathematics by studying mathematicians' brains. It's not really a very skillful approach. And so when you shut down the mind, that is, you deactivate the mind, well, we call that falling asleep. And the coarse mind is inactive in non-lucid, stage 4, non-REM sleep. Deep asleep, you don't explicitly know anything at all. You're not even that you're asleep. So many psychologists think then you're totally unconscious. I beg to differ. You have no explicit consciousness, but there's an implicit flow of consciousness. And we call that the substrate consciousness, or the alaya vijnana, from the Dzogchen perspective. But of course, we don't normally get to enjoy it because we're not explicitly aware of it. But it is possible to be lucid in dreamless sleep. You can be in deep dreamless sleep and know it. That is definitely possible. Just like lucid dreaming is possible, this is possible. We enter into this state, the substrate consciousness, when we fall deep asleep. This is the bhavanga in the Theravada tradition. When you go comatose, you faint, you achieve shamatha, and you die. But among those various options, about 4 of them would just happen naturally. Shamatha, you access that same dimension of consciousness, but you do so with increasing clarity as you're proceeding along the path to access to the first jhana. So when you arrive there, it is radiantly clear, like moving from a 10-watt bulb to a 1,000-watt bulb. And that dimension of consciousness, in the Buddhist view, and this is a hypothesis, it's not a dogma, or it can be, then it's boring. But as an empirical hypothesis, this is thrilling. This dimension of consciousness is one that carries on from lifetime to lifetime. And it, not the brain, is the repository of memories, habitual tendencies, and so forth. And that's a testable hypothesis. And how is it tested? Train a number of people to achieve shamatha, to rest in that substrate consciousness, which is not contingent upon the brain. Precedes the brain, carries on after brain death. It, in the Buddhist view, is the repository of memories, predilections, habits, abilities, and so forth and so on. So here's a very simple test. Unlike all of the scientific theories that are rooted in materialism, none of which can be tested or have been tested, utterly contrary to what Richie implied, at least other people say, this is a testable hypothesis. This is a scientific hypothesis. Train a number of people, the more the better, to achieve shamatha. And then, following the teachings of Buddhaghosa 1,500 years ago, a great Theravada commentator, teach such people, at least with shamatha, even better if they've achieved higher states of samadhi, and then have them direct their attention to the past and see if they can retrieve veridically memories from their youth, their childhood, which is said to be true, you can do that. And then ask a 66-year-old, not this one, but somebody else, who has achieved shamatha, say, now what you recall, now that you're accessing true memories from the time you're 4 and 3 and 2 years old, now, okay, Mr. Wallace, who has achieved shamatha, hypothetically, purely hypothetically, now when you direct the laser of your attention, because you've got an attention, it's like a laser now, direct it to where were you and what were you experiencing 68 years ago? Perfectly good question. And there are 3 logical possibilities. The shamatha adept, one who's actually achieved it, says, I'm sorry, I'm coming with a blank screen. No data. The materialist would say, I told you so. Another one, they come up with, I remember this, and it's all fantasy. Just fantasy, you know? I was Cleopatra, I was Napoleon. Oh, yeah, maybe. But there's a third possibility. The person comes up with the memories, and they're tested scientifically by open-minded, critical, skeptical scientists, or anybody else, and see, okay, what is your memory? Oh, you were this old man living in Buenos Aires. Tell us more. And then they do investigation. They do investigation. And there is a way to empirically put to the test, which has been done thousands of times already within the Buddhist and Hindu traditions and Taoist traditions. Do it in the modern scientific context. There's a dimension of consciousness that is not brain dependent. And it's out of that continuum of consciousness that mind emerges. So we ask, for what are the origins of mind? It's not neurons. It's not synapses, dendrite to glial cells. As Thomas Huxley said, this is like pulling a genie out of a lamp. It's magical thinking. Or Giulio Tononi, a neuroscientist at the University of Wisconsin, said, this is like immaculate conception. The thing that chemicals and electricity actually give rise to subjective experience. I've studied physics. It's wacko physics. They know a lot, physicists know a lot about matter and energy. There's no suggestion anywhere that they give rise to dreams. It's a silly idea that's become commonplace. Ripa is another order of magnitude beyond that. Ripa is transcendent. Substrate consciousness is with samsara. It's within the realm of deep psychology. Let's say transpersonal psychology, but empirical. But for that, you need to develop the appropriate technology, and that's shamatha. To realize the empty nature of mind, you need vipassana. To cut through the conditioned mind to unconditioned mind, for that you need Dzogchen. Okay.
From live stream.
Yeah.
Yes. Could you speak about the importance of devotion to Guru and Dzogchen?
I missed the first part?
Can you speak about the importance of devotion to the Guru and Dzogchen, and how to develop such devotion correctly?
Okay. The question is what is the relationship between devotion, and specifically Guru devotion or Guru yoga, and the practice of Dzogchen? What's the relationship? How important is it? And insofar as it is important, how do you go about doing it? Right? Good. Generally speaking, in all schools of Buddhism, starting with the foundation Pali Canon, the relationship with the Kalyana Mitra, the spiritual friend, the spiritual mentor, is enormously important. It's a guide. Imagine trying to learn guitar on your own with no guitar teacher. Learning mathematics just by picking up mathematics books. You know, can it be done? Yeah, in principle. There are prodigies who just are self-taught, but we know how rare they are. So that's for chemistry. For learning medicine, would you like to have brain surgery done on yourself by a person who read a lot of books on it and think, I think I can do it. Can I try in your brain? You know, for any serious, sophisticated level of knowledge, you want a teacher. And serious and sophisticated is a pretty good characterization of the Four Noble Truths. If your aspiration is to be forever and completely free of all mental afflictions, that's nothing trivial about that. And so clearly you're going to be a lot more effective if you find an authentic teacher and relate to this person in a very meaningful, respectful, reverent way. But that's true actually for everything else too. As we move into, and in the Tibetan tradition, they say if you're following, let's say, the Shravaka path, the path to become an arhat, view your own teacher as if he or she were an emissary or an ambassador of the Buddha. Because this is as close to the Buddha as you're going to get. The Buddha is 2,500 years ago, but this is an unbroken continuum, a lineage, a current of the teachings. And the teacher you have, make sure you choose well. That the teacher is authentic, is ethical, is well motivated, has sound understanding, is a skillful teacher, and is teaching for one reason only, above all one reason, and that's compassion. If there's any other motivation for teaching, find another teacher, because it's probably not going to be a motivation that can be to your advantage. So first of all, choose well. In the Mahayana tradition, it goes even deeper. Now view your teacher as if he or she were a Buddha, as a conduit of the blessings of Dharmakaya, of the blessings of the Buddha, as not simply historical character, but a living presence. And so they're a very deeply spiritual view of the Buddha mind Dharmakaya being everywhere present, but like light coming through a magnifying glass, really funneled through, focusing through. An authentic Mahayana Buddhist teacher. There's a person with experience of bodhicitta, insight into emptiness, some experience of shamatha, skillful teacher, knowledgeable, experienced, and compassionate. When we move into Vajrayana and then specifically Dzogchen, now we're doing something quite extraordinary, which makes sense if and only if one has some genuine insight into emptiness and genuine intuitive affirmation, at the very least, of the omnipresent nature of Dharmakaya. The theme that comes in the Uttara Tantra, one of the 5 works of Maitreya, that the mind streams of every sentient being are saturated by Buddha nature, saturated by the mind of the Buddha, indivisibly saturated by. So where your guru is, where your guru's mind is, there is the Dharmakaya. There is Rigpa, there is primordial consciousness. So then it's a matter of choice. If you're following Dzogchen, it's a matter of choice. It's perfectly legit. For example, some people regard me as their lamas, and I teach Dzogchen, so for some people I'm a Dzogchen lama. Does that mean that suddenly I'm a highly realized, perfected being? Not even remotely. But where I am, as where Daniel is, and where Kestrel is, and anybody else here, where you are, there is Buddha mind. So I'm going to say that. Where my mind is, there is Buddha mind. That's true. It's true. Right? Where I am, there's also a sentient being's mind. Like a guy from California, you know? That's also true. Where I am, here's my substrate consciousness. Carried on from past lives, will carry on into the future. That's also here. So it's your choice. It's not an invitation to be your guru, it's just a choice in general. That as you attend to your guru, you can, if you wish, simply regard your guru as a sentient being. It could very well be true. You can view your guru as this continuum based upon the continuum of substrate consciousness. But you can, if you wish, seeing the empty nature of your guru as a sentient being, that there is nothing from the guru's side that is inherently a sentient being. Try to find it. Try to find it in yourself. Have you ever looked within and tried to find that nuclear sentient being that is you? And I think I can guarantee you're not going to find it. It is conventionally existent, and that's all. And so it's a matter of choice, where we never thought we even had a choice. But we may, if we choose, look through the veneer of appearances, which are strongly conditioned by our own karma, our predilections, our beliefs, preconceptions, and so forth. Look through the veneer of the coarse mind, look through the veneer of the substrate consciousness. As with X-ray vision, look right down to the core, the Buddha nature that is there where your guru is, Dharmakaya that is there where your guru is. And on that basis, designate, this is my guru. My guru is Vajradhara, Vidyadhara, Vajradhara, Samantabhadra, Adi Buddha. My guru is Buddha. Because where my guru is, there is Buddha mind. And it's on that basis I'm identifying my guru. And for me, my guru is Buddha. But this goes hand in hand. We say, well, what's the big deal? Why are you doing that? Well, number one, you get a lot more benefit that way. But two, this is all a preamble, it's a preparation. Because the whole point of Vajrayana in general, and Dzogchen in particular, is to realize when you cut through the veneer of your own self-preconceptions, your ordinary sense of who you are, your ordinary sense of identity, ordinary way of appearing to yourself, cut through that. There's nothing there that exists from its own side. Cut through that, cut through the substrate consciousness, and know your own face as Rigpa, which has always been present. So the devotion, the reverence, the focus on the Guru as Buddha is really simply the other side of the coin of coming to know yourself as a Buddha. Now, in a way, it's very helpful to have an extraordinary teacher. I know Daniel's teacher, Gawang Rinpoche, extraordinary master. And you see such people, His Holiness Dalai Lama, Dingo Khyentse Rinpoche, Dudjom Rinpoche, Dzong Rinpoche. I've met such people, and you stand in awe of them. If you kind of get them, you say, whoa. And what comes about this, boy, he's so much not like me. You know, when I first met the Dalai Lama, I was like, whoa, he's my guru, but boy, is he not like me. And Yangchen Rinpoche, Vidyadhara, oh, boy, is he not like me. You know, and Gyatso Rinpoche and other great teachers. The 16th Karmapa, the current Karmapa, awesome beings. The current incarnation of Dudjom Lingpa, young man, awesome. And so it's very easy to feel devotion for these beings who just manifest to us with majesty, with a deep sense of the sacred. But in so doing, we also have a sense of, and then there's me, way down here. And it actually can support or reinforce the sense, aw shucks, little old me. But that's not the point. The point is not to adulate or to revere the guru as an end in itself. All of that is a preparation for realizing your own mind as Buddha mind. And so in a way, it's actually more potent to have a guru, your root guru, a Dzogchen master, who appears to you a lot like yourself. Maybe even the same skin color. Could be helpful to have same gender, same country, same language. Boy, you're pretty much like me, a little bit better, but pretty much like me. If you can view that person, who seems so similar to yourself, if you can cut through the veneer of that person and see that person as a Buddha, oh, then you're right next door to recognize your own nature as Buddha. So that's the advantage of having an ordinary schmuck who's qualified Dzogchen teacher. I've been authorized to teach Dzogchen. I'm ordinary schmuck. That's who I am. But I've been qualified to teach Dzogchen, and I do it with my utmost ability to not distort the teachings. So in that regard, I think most Dzogchen teachers have much more realization than I have. But I have the advantage of being an ordinary schmuck.
In meditation, you can take awareness as an object.
Certainly.
And then also you can do a meditation where you sink back into that subjective awareness itself.
Think back into?
Sink back.
Sink back into.
it.
Mm-hmm.
So this person is asking, so what is the shamatha meditation that you're teaching in this course? Are you supposed to take awareness as an object, or are you supposed to sink back into subjectivity, or something else?
It's not so much a matter of thinking back, because that sounds very cogitative or ruminating. It's not that. So shamatha is not really thinking back into, but it's sem nirubapa, and that is settling the mind in its unconditioned state, not ultimately unconditioned, but unconditioned on a relative sense. Resting, releasing all grasping, while maintaining the flow of discerning, non-conceptual awareness. So when we first start the shamatha practice of simply observing the mind, we're observing thoughts, images, memories coming up. Dzogchen Lingpa comments in the passage I would have read to you, but it would have taken a lot longer than I anticipated. You're observing the mind with the mind. The conceptual mind is observing the conceptual mind. So you're basically in it. It's like observing a swamp with your up to your neck in the swamp. But then as you go deeper into it, the cognitive fusion with the activities of the mind diminishes. And so Dzogchen Lingpa says it's much more like a shepherd watching his flock out on an open plain, while the shepherd sits still while the flock moves hither and yon. And so that cognitive fusion is dissipating in the sense of the stillness of your awareness as you're observing thoughts. You invert your awareness in upon itself, but it's still likely, your awareness of awareness is still very likely to be conditioned by your thoughts, your ideas, your preconceptions, your beliefs about consciousness. Because after all, our experience is generally strongly conditioned by our past experience, language, acculturation, personal history, and so on. But as you continue to release and relax while maintaining the clarity, then you're not thinking back into, but the locus of your awareness, the word is bapa, descends from its ordinary field, which is all cut up in dualistic thinking and so forth, radical demarcation between subject and object. It's slipping deeper and deeper into this dimension of consciousness that is all that's left when you fall deep asleep. All that's left when you've gone brain dead on your way to dying. You're almost dead. In fact, this is the point at which, the Buddhist doctor said, now you're dead. When your mind is irretrievably dissolved back into the substrate consciousness. So you're not observing substrate consciousness from the mind, substrate consciousness experiencing itself. That's non-conceptual. Not absolutely, but that resting in the substrate consciousness is unconditioned by gender, ethnicity, language, personal history, and unconditioned by the brain. That's a hypothesis, and it's a testable hypothesis. That's what makes me so joyful about it. This one, we can actually get some knowledge and not just be bickering back and forth, religion versus science, religious dogma versus scientific dogma. Let's break out of that. That's what the Dalai Lama was getting at, And so it's still shamatha. When you're resting in the substrate consciousness and the type of mindfulness there, when you've achieved shamatha, Dzogchen Lingpa says this is self-illuminating mindfulness, where the substrate consciousness is illuminating itself, or in the Theravada tradition it's called Bhavasa-citta, the brightly shining mind, the Bhavanga, which is the ground of becoming from which all the javana, or activities of the mind, including the 5 physical senses, all emerge and into which they dissolve in deep sleep, right? And so that's still shamatha, but it's gone very quiet and only subliminally conceptual at a very, very subtle level. And there's a subtle level of grasping. When you achieve shamatha, it's said to be characterized by 3 qualities, and this doesn't matter whether you're Christian, agnostic, Buddhist, Hindu, what have you. This is like, it's said that every snow crystal, every snowflake is completely unique, so it's said, yeah? But if you melt any of them, then one drop of water is like any other drop of water. And so your mind is absolutely unique. There's nobody that has your mind in the entire universe. I mean, that's an a priori certainty, right? Nobody has your personal history, case closed. But if you melt, and that's a term that's often used metaphorically, if you melt your mind down to your substrate consciousness from which your mind arose and which your mind will dissolve when you die, then that's like a drop of water. That is your direct experience of it. Now, it is conditioned by karma, past memories, and so forth and so on, but when you're just resting in the bhavanga, or the substrate consciousness, upon achieving shamatha, there's just 3 qualities. De selmitokpa. It's blissful, luminous, and non-conceptual. That doesn't matter who you are, what your belief system is, whether you're human or non-human. These are the qualities when you clearly illuminate this underlying continuum of consciousness from within itself. And it's beyond brain, beyond conditioning of this life versus that. But it's the ground of becoming, so when you take your next birth, your next, maybe you'll be a woman or a man, who knows what next time, your mind then will emerge from that continuum. Beyond that, though, that's where the pristine awareness is. You cut through that. Then you're into what's called the 4th time, because Rigpa is not located in the past or the future, and not even located within this narrow sliver of the present moment. It's in the 4th time, beyond time. It's atemporal and non-local. Yeah?
About more being and less doing.
Oh, yeah.
You've talked about that, and I don't want to misquote you, but I wanted to clarify with you, how does intention fit into that? Intention, because I associate intention with action, and being with just being.
Yeah. Well, intention is a very important term. There's a very closely related term that is highlighted an enormous degree in Mahayana tradition, Tibetan, Vajrayana, and Dzogchen. It's motivation. Motivation, intention, very close, right? And so it's very true. In our extrospective, outward-looking modern society, have you ever heard the phrase, don't just sit there, do something stupid? Ever heard that one before? So we are Eurocentric civilization for at least the past 400 years. Has been a civilization with the Protestant ethic, with our conquering of North, South America, most of the rest of the globe, through imperialism, colonialism, and so forth, with the rise of the scientific revolution and the Protestant Reformation. I mean, all these forces converging in on one thing. Be productive. Conquer at least, but do something, And therefore, intention is always linked to doing something. But of course, if you become inspired by the teachings and practices of Dzogchen, will you do it or not? It's your choice, which means it's your intention. But then when it comes to Vajrayana in particular, and Dzogchen more specifically, it is said actually there's only one authentic or suitable fit in terms of motivation. It's got to be bodhicitta. If one practices Vajrayana or Dzogchen with a self-centered motivation, I want something for me, I'm out for myself, I just want to achieve something myself, that's your choice, but you can't practice Dzogchen. It's a total mismatch. It's a total mismatch. It's said in Dujam Lingpa's writings, in the Vajra essence, that relative bodhicitta, you know the term, the aspiration to achieve enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings, the bodhisattva ideal, spontaneously emerges from Rigpa. And that's intention, right? So intention, motivation, as just part of mental health. We can speak very deeply about Dzogchen, but I think it's good to come back to where we just live our day-to-day lives, whether in Boston or anywhere else. How relevant are these teachings, which are really quite esoteric in many ways? How relevant are they for us in our day-to-day lives, doing grocery shopping, balancing our checkbooks, hopefully, and just doing the stuff that we need to do throughout the course of the day. And I would suggest that we living in modernity, it's especially the 20th century, but it goes back to the 17th century. Blaise Pascal, the great French mathematician and philosopher, he said, and I paraphrase very concisely, he said, the trouble with modern man is our inability to sit quietly in our chambers. Even then we are addicted to, and I think it is a literal addiction, addicted to stimulation, addicted to doing, addicted to keeping busy, even if it's keeping busy with something that is absolutely devoid of any meaning whatsoever. Better that than just be quiet and be still. But, you know, this is wisdom of the ages, and it's east and west. Be still and know thyself. Be still and know thyself deeper and deeper and deeper. But you won't do that unless you have intention. Other than on this note, go back, I'm going to take a little trip off the left field. Greek antiquity, Socrates, Plato, Aristotle. These powerful thinkers, they're still influencing us to this day. That's pretty formidable. They drew a very sharp and clear distinction between hedonia, and this is all the pleasure we get from the world, from family, friends, sensual enjoyments, activities, successes, prestige, wealth, power, and so forth. Hedonia. Good, bad, neutral, it's everything, but it's hedonia. And it comes and goes. And you die, it just goes, right? Everything you've acquired is lost. And then there's what the Greeks call eudaimonia, genuine well-being. And if hedonia is the joy we get from the world, eudaimonia is the well-being that we bring to the world. It's by our way of life, by the quality of mind we bring to the world, by the quality of insight, of wisdom we bring to the world. And that can carry us through all the vicissitudes of life and death, right? But in order to prioritize, to place of great value, not on the pursuit of eudaimonia, but the cultivation of eudaimonia, for that, we must spend time in stillness, as I was forced to when I was 24 years old and was told I had to sit through 10 days of Goenka's retreat when he gave very little teaching and had to sit for 11 hours a day. And it was just miserable seeing what a mess my mind was. And I thought, if this is what I'm bringing to the world, maybe I should clean up my own act before I have any pretense of being a Buddhist scholar or anything else, you know? And so that time of stillness, it's a time for searing honesty. And as we have this term genuine happiness from the Greeks, I've coined a term genuine unhappiness. And as hedonia is always stimulus-driven, it's a response to something pleasant. There's stimulus-driven unhappiness, and that's also a response to something unpleasant. Something happens that I didn't want, or something doesn't happen that I did want, and then I'm happy. That's pretty simple. But what about when you're sitting quietly in your chambers, as Blaise Pascal suggested, and there's nothing good or bad happening to you? You're living, just sitting in a room quietly. And what if, while you're sitting there quietly in good health, well-fed, not thirsty, not cold, not too hot, just sitting there, if in that simplicity, in that solitude of just being yourself in the universe, if you experience dukkha, a sense of uneasiness, of dissatisfaction, of boredom, of restlessness, of agitation, of malaise, that's genuine unhappiness. Because that's what you're bringing to the world, not what you're getting from it. And so if our ground state is one where you're sitting quietly, with nothing coming in, pleasant or unpleasant from the environment, and not even thinking happy thoughts or having unhappy thoughts, just being present. And if you so cultivate the balance of the mind, then a sense of well-being springs right from the very nature of your mind itself. It's a symptom of a wonderfully balanced mind, a symptom of a healthy mind. Whereas a mind that is chronically and habitually prone to rumination, craving, hostility, agitation, restlessness, egotism, boredom, and so forth, these are all symptoms. The dukkha of that is a symptom of a mind that's fundamentally unhealthy. And how we deal with that in modernity, I'm very sad to say, is lose ourselves in work, lose ourselves after work in entertainment, and then lose ourselves in drugs. Alcohol, nicotine, legal drugs, illegal drugs. And if anything's seriously wrong with your mind, well, after all, it's probably a brain disorder, so take a drug. Just say yes. And that's what we're telling our teenagers. If they have depression, which is on the rise, gone up 10 times since the rise of modern neuroscience, which is supposed to solve our problem mentally, because they're actually brain disorders, depression has gone up 10 times over the last 50, 60 years. And general anxiety disorder, insomnia, post-traumatic stress disorder, ADHD. And what's our primary intervention? There are many very good therapists and psychiatrists. But overall, drugs tend to be the first resort. And the drugs are shoot the messenger. Because these are symptoms of a mind that is not balanced. And instead of balancing the mind, we smother the symptoms. So in very important ways, I think we're living in a dark age right now. A dark age about the nature and the potentials of the mind, the sources of eudaimonia, the sources of true suffering. And we're smothering it with work, entertainment, and drugs. That's not a sign of an enlightened era. It's a sign of an era in a dark age. And of the great contemplative tradition, this is not a sectarian statement, the great contemplative traditions, the Sufi, the Christian, the Buddhist, Muslim, Taoist, and so forth, have just a treasure troves of wisdom that we can be drawing on. But maybe, and my strong hunch is, these great contemplative traditions, each one of them great in its own right, I think they need a kick in the behind from science. Because religions tend to be complacent, self-satisfied, dogmatic, closed-minded, and rigid. You know, but that's what people do. Not just East or West. Scientists do that too. They fall into the trench of scientific materialism, and they don't even know they've fallen into it. They just think they're being scientific. Science needs to be rescued by the contemplatives, and the great contemplative traditions need to be rescued by science. And then we'll see a great union of meaning and truth to the benefit of all without exception.